My mother-in-law switched my baby's name at birth. Said I didn't deserve to choose. I stayed quiet. Years later that name became a global brand. She now introduces herself using it. The nurse looked straight at me, pen poised over the birth certificate form. I opened my mouth but nothing came out. My throat was dry, my body limp. Before I could gather the strength to speak, she turned to my mother-in-law, who stood tall beside my bed like she owned the room. Her name is Alara, she said with a smile so calm it felt rehearsed. The nurse nodded, wrote it down and walked away. I blinked. Alara? That wasn't the name. That wasn't the name I whispered to my baby every night. That wasn't the name I embroidered on the blanket. That wasn't the name I dreamed of. But no one looked at me. No one asked me again. My husband was busy texting family updates. The room buzzed with congratulations. And I lay there, stitched and silent. I had chosen the name Mira. It came to me one quiet afternoon, sitting by the window with a cup of chamomile tea and my swollen belly resting against my thighs. Mira meant light in one language, ocean in another. It was soft yet strong. I imagined her growing into it, curious, kind, resilient. I wrote it in my journal over and over, practicing how I'd say it. I even whispered it to her through my skin, hoping she'd recognize it when she heard it aloud. I didn't tell my husband. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I wanted that moment to be mine. The first time I'd say her name would be the first time she'd hear it. I thought that was sacred. The betrayal didn't come with shouting or drama. It came quietly like a thief in the night. I was too weak to fight. Too overwhelmed to correct. And she knew it. My mother-in-law had always been assertive, but that day she crossed a line I didn't even know existed. She didn't ask. He didn't hesitate. He just claimed it. And everyone accepted it. I remember lying in that hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself it didn't matter. It's just a name, I whispered. She's still my daughter. But it did matter. It mattered more than I could admit. That night I stood in the hospital shower, letting the water run cold. I didn't cry loudly. I didn't scream. I just let the tears fall quietly like the name I'd lost. I thought about the blanket I'd embroidered. It was still in my hospital bag, untouched. I thought about the journal entries, the sketches, the dreams. I felt erased. Like someone had taken a piece of me and replaced it with something else. I didn't tell my husband. He was tired too. Happy. Oblivious. I didn't want to ruin the moment. So I folded the blanket and tucked it deep into the bottom of my suitcase. I didn't look at it again for years. Back home, the house filled with visitors, gifts, and noise. My mother-in-law moved in for support. She took over the nursery, rearranged the drawers, and even changed the baby's feeding schedule. She told people she was helping, but it felt more like she was rewriting everything. She picked out outfits, corrected how I held her, and once told a neighbor, "I'm basically raising her." I stood there holding my baby, pretending not to hear. My husband laughed it off. "She's just excited," he said. "She means well." But I knew better. I started keeping a diary, not just of my daughter's milestones, but of every moment I felt pushed aside. Every time she made a decision without asking. Every time she introduced my daughter using the name she chose. It became my quiet rebellion. One afternoon I overheard her on the phone with a friend. "She's named after me, you know," she said proudly. "I chose it. It suits her perfectly." I felt my stomach twist. She wasn't just claiming the name, she was claiming the story. The identity. The connection. I wanted to scream. But I didn't. I smiled when she walked past. I nodded when she offered advice. I let her take credit. But inside I was building something. A quiet fire. A vow. During nap times I started sketching again. Not just names but symbols. Ideas. Concepts. I didn't know what I was creating, but it felt like reclaiming. I drew a small sun with waves beneath it. I wrote Mira in different fonts, different styles. I imagined it on notebooks, on packaging, on storefronts. It was my secret world. A place where I still had a voice. I didn't know then that I was planting seeds. I just knew I needed something that was mine. One day, while organizing the closet, I found the embroidered blanket. It was tucked behind a stack of old towels, still folded neatly. I held it in my hands and traced the letters with my fingers. Mira. Still felt right. I wrapped it around myself and sat on the floor, breathing slowly. That name wasn't gone. It was waiting. Waiting for me to be ready. I never confronted her. Not directly. I didn't want to fight. I wanted something stronger. Something lasting. So I kept building. Quietly. Patiently. I let her think she'd won. I let her believe the name was hers. But I knew the truth. And I knew one day I'd make sure the world knew it too. That was the beginning. The moment I chose silence over conflict. The moment I let her take the name but not the meaning. Not the story. Not the soul behind it. I carried that silence for years. But I never let go of the name. I never let go of Mira. And that made all the difference. The attic was hot and dusty, filled with boxes that hadn't been touched in years. I wasn't looking for anything in particular. Just clearing space before the holidays. But when I opened the old cedar chest tucked behind a stack of photo albums, I froze. There was the blanket. Soft, faded, and still carrying the scent of lavender sachets I'd tucked in with it. My fingers trembled as I unfolded it. Mir. The name was stitched in pale blue thread, delicate and deliberate. I sat down right there on the wooden floor, the sunlight slicing through the slats, and stared at it like it had just spoken to me. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just felt something shift inside me. That name wasn't lost. It had waited. Quietly. Patiently. And now it was mine again. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just felt something shift inside me. That name wasn't lost. It had waited. Quietly. Patiently. And now it was mine again. That night, after everyone was asleep, I pulled out my old sketchbook. I hadn't drawn in years. But my hand moved like it remembered. I sketched the name in bold letters, then cursive, then playful loops. I added symbols. Waves, stars, a tiny sun. I imagined it on a box, on a tag, on a storefront window. I didn't know what I was building. I just knew I had to build it. I didn't tell anyone. Not my husband. Not my daughter. Especially not her. I started with handmade journals. I'd always loved paper. The texture, the smell, the way it held stories. I sourced recycled materials, stitched the bindings myself, and stamped each cover with the name, Mira. I listed them online under a simple shop name. No backstory. No explanation. Just the name and the product. Orders came slowly at first. A few friends, then strangers. Then repeat customers. I added candles, tote bags, and eventually skincare. Each item carried the name. Each sale felt like a small victory. I registered the brand officially. Mira & Company. I built a website, hired a photographer, and created a logo. I kept everything clean, minimal, and elegant. I didn't want it to scream. I wanted it to whisper, just like the name had whispered to me years ago. I hired 2 women from my neighborhood to help with packaging. We worked from my garage, laughing over tea and folding boxes late into the night. They didn't know the story behind the name. No one did. And that was fine. The brand spoke for itself. Then came the post. A well-known lifestyle influencer shared a photo of our candle on her kitchen counter. "Smells like peace," she wrote. Within hours, our website crashed from traffic. I stayed up all night answering emails, restocking inventory, and refreshing the page. The next week, a magazine featured us in their top 10 indie brands to watch. I stared at the article, my heart pounding. There was Mir in bold print. On glossy paper. I clipped it and tucked it into my journal right next to the original sketches. The name spread like wildfire. People loved the simplicity, the elegance, the story they imagined behind it. I watched interviews where stylists and editors praised its timeless charm. I smiled quietly. They didn't know the real story. But I did. And that was enough. Then came the twist I didn't expect. My mother-in-law started bragging. "That's my granddaughter's name," she'd say at brunches and book clubs. "I named her that, you know." I overheard her once on the phone, telling someone she'd always known it would be a special name. I bit my tongue so hard it hurt. He didn't know. She had no idea that the brand wasn't built on her choice. It was built on mine. On the name she stole. On the silence I kept. My husband noticed the buzz. "Funny how that name stuck," he said one evening while scrolling through his phone. "You never liked it much, did you?" I smiled and changed the subject. He didn't remember. He didn't know. And I wasn't ready to tell him. Not yet. My daughter, now a teenager, started asking questions. "Why did you name me Mira?" she asked one night while helping me label jars. I paused. "It's a beautiful name," I said. "It means light. And ocean. And strength." She nodded, satisfied for now. but I saw the curiosity in her eyes. I knew one day she'd want the full story. And I'd be ready. The strangest moment came at a local market. I was setting up our booth when I saw her. My mother-in-law. Wearing a scarf with our logo. She walked up, smiled, and said, "I tell everyone this brand is named after me." I didn't flinch. I just handed her a sample and said, "Enjoy." She didn't notice the look in my eyes. She never did. Then came the invitation. A major women's conference wanted me to speak about building a brand from scratch. I hesitated. I wasn't a public speaker. I liked working behind the scenes. But something inside me said it was time. Time to reclaim the story. Time to speak. The auditorium was packed. I stood backstage clutching my notes, heart racing. When they called my name, I walked out slowly, took the mic, and looked at the crowd. My mother-in-law sat in the front row, smiling proudly. I began. "I want to tell you about a name," I said. A name that was whispered before it was spoken. A name that was taken before it was given. A name that waited quietly until it could be reclaimed. The room went silent. I didn't choose silence because I was weak. I chose it because I was building something stronger. I built a brand not just to sell products but to reclaim a piece of myself. And today that name stands not for what was stolen, but for what was created. I didn't look at her. I didn't need to. Her smile faded. Her hands folded in her lap. And I kept speaking. When I finished, the applause was thunderous. I walked off stage, head high, heart steady. I had taken control. Not with anger. Not with confrontation. But with creation. With truth. And Mira, my Mira, was finally mine. I stepped off the stage, the applause still ringing in my ears, but my heart was quiet. Not triumphant, just steady. I didn't rush to the green room. I didn't look for congratulations. I walked straight to the back hallway where the lights were dim and the air smelled faintly of coffee and old carpet. That's where she found me. Her heels clicked sharply against the tile. "Why would you say that?" she asked, her voice low but sharp. Her eyes were wide, not with confusion but with panic. I turned slowly, met her gaze, and said, "Because it's true." She blinked as if hoping I'd take it back. I didn't. I stood firm, arms folded, voice calm. "You took something from me when I couldn't fight back. You knew I had chosen a name. You knew it mattered. And you claimed it like it was yours." Her lips parted, then closed. "I didn't think it would hurt you," she said, almost whispering. "I thought you'd be grateful." I didn't laugh. I didn't cry. I just said, "You didn't ask. You decided." And I stayed quiet. But I didn't forget. She looked down, then back up. "I didn't know you felt that way." "You didn't want to know," I replied. She started to cry. Not loud sobs, just silent tears that streaked her makeup. I didn't comfort her. I let her sit with it. I'd carried that silence for years. It was hers now. That night after the event, I sat on the edge of my daughter's bed. She was brushing her hair, her eyes thoughtful. "Mom," she said softly, "was that story about me?" I nodded. It was. She turned to face me. "Why didn't you tell me before?" I took a breath. "Because I didn't want you to carry my pain. I wanted you to grow into your name without the weight of what happened." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "I love my name even more now." I smiled. "It's always been yours. Even when it wasn't." She hugged me tightly, her arms around my shoulders, and I felt something shift. I hadn't just reclaimed the name. I'd passed down something stronger. A legacy. A quiet kind of power. The next morning, my husband made coffee and sat across from me at the kitchen table. He looked tired, thoughtful. "I didn't know," he said. "About the name. About what happened." I stirred my cup slowly. "I didn't tell you. I should have noticed," he said. "I should have asked." I looked at him, really looked. "You were happy. We all were. I didn't want to ruin that." He reached across the table, took my hand. "I'm sorry." I nodded. "Thank you." From that day on, something shifted. He started noticing more. Listening more. Standing beside me, not just behind me. At family gatherings, he corrected people gently when they misrepresented the brand's story. He told them it was mine. That I built it. That it came from something personal. My in-laws grew quieter around me. Not cold, just cautious. The power dynamic had changed. I wasn't just the quiet daughter-in-law anymore. I was the woman who built something from silence. And they knew it. I didn't seek revenge. I didn't want apologies. I wanted space. So I took it. I expanded the brand. New products, new markets. I hired women who'd been overlooked, dismissed, silenced. I listened to their stories. I mentored them. I told them to speak up, to create, to reclaim. I watched them bloom. And in helping them, I healed myself. The name became more than a brand. It became a movement. A symbol of quiet strength. Of resilience. Of transformation. I made sure my story was part of it. Not loud, not dramatic, but present. In interviews, I spoke about the importance of voice. Of choice. Of honoring the things we whisper to ourselves when no one's listening. One afternoon, I received a letter from a young woman who'd bought one of our journals. She wrote, "I named my daughter Mira because of your brand." I didn't know the story, but the name felt like hope. I sat with that letter for a long time. Then I framed it and hung it in my studio. Years passed. The brand grew. My daughter graduated. My husband retired early and started helping with logistics. Life became quieter, fuller. But there was one place I hadn't returned to. The hospital. One rainy morning I drove there alone. I parked in the same lot, walked through the same sliding doors. The hallway hadn't changed. Same beige walls. Same soft hum of machines. I stood outside the maternity ward, closed my eyes and whispered the name again. Mira. This time it echoed. I smiled. I had come full circle. The silence I kept had bloomed into something powerful. And I was finally at peace. As I turned to leave, a nurse passed by and smiled. "Beautiful name," she said. I nodded. "Yes. It is."